are in that near death, they see their life flash before their eyes. And I had that experience, like that's how certain I was that if I didn't do what this man said, that he would kill me. Like there was just no doubt that he was serious about, killing us. So, it was me and a girlfriend that he abducted. And so, when you have that much certainty and belief that this is not going to end well if you don't do what this person says, for me, I froze. I didn't fight.
Hi, I'm Dr. Nafisa Sikandri, a licensed clinical psychologist specializing in anxiety-based disorders. I created the Mental Health Break podcast to give you simple, actionable, step-by-step strategies to help you prioritize your mental health. Mental illness can cost you time and money. Ignoring your symptoms will only make the problems worse. Taking time out of your busy day to dedicate to improving your mental health can lead to long-term health and wellness. In this podcast, each week you'll learn tips, tricks, and proven strategies to help you regain control of your life, all while prioritizing your mental health. If you want to improve your life, regain control of your mental health, and feel empowered, you're in the right place. Let's get started. Today's episode is proudly brought to you by the second annual Mental Health Reset Conference happening on Saturday, January 11th, 2025 in sunny Phoenix, Arizona. Join us for an inspirational and fun-filled day where you'll learn how to improve your mental and physical health from a holistic and integrative perspective. Meet wonderful, like-minded individuals and leave feeling empowered and confident about your health and wellness goals for 2025. Space is limited, so register now at drsikandri.com/MHRattend. Today, I'll be speaking to a high-performance mindset coach who has experienced devastating loss. Despite the tragic loss, she has managed to help thousands of people. Let me briefly introduce her before I bring her on. Judy Thureson has a genuine desire to see people live their most authentic life. She's a high-performance mindset coach, helps with subconscious reprogramming, and is a grief and trauma expert. In the last decade, she has helped thousands of clients transform their mental, physical, and spiritual health. Judy helps her clients unlock their superpower. She is passionate about helping her clients heal and grow through adversity. In June of 2019, Judy experienced the tragic loss of her 18-year-old son, Jacob, to opioid overdose. In the midst of her unimaginable grief, she wrote the #1 best-selling book, Beautiful Tragedy: How to Build Strength and Resilience During Life's Greatest Challenges. Her book chronicles her experience and introduces the GIVE principle. Judy is a trusted advisor for grieving families. She shares tools on how to use healthy coping skills to navigate the storms of grief and uncertainty. Hi, Judy. Thank you for joining me on the Mental Health Break podcast.
Hi, thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
I'm glad to talk to you. I just briefly introduced you and talked a little bit about the loss of your son, but also your work as a high-performance mindset coach. Can you tell us a little bit about what is it that you do, who do you help, and what got you interested in doing what you're currently doing?
Yes, thank you. I kind of do a lot of things, but my favorite thing is to help people grow through adversity, grow through trauma, grief, loss, and not just to survive it, but to really thrive. And I do that because I am like the poster child of what is possible. Someone who's experienced such deep trauma my whole life, and to be able to not just live through it, but to use it as my purpose to help others with it. Like you mentioned, losing our son Jacob in 2019, obviously, as a parent, there's nothing worse than experiencing that loss. And so I am a trusted advisor to many families, grieving families, and helping them navigate through that very traumatic, tragic time. And I help a lot of entrepreneurs and leaders who, want to succeed, but then they get stuck, right? They hit that ceiling, they start self-sabotaging, they just all their limiting beliefs come up to, keep them from really succeeding and following their dreams and their goals. So those are my main specialties, are helping people break through those limiting beliefs and helping people navigate through deep, loss and grief.
You know, what little I know about you, you've gone through so much, so many experiences that you can honestly, each one could be a book in itself. And so the loss of your son being the most recent, probably, how do you think the experiences you've had in the past helped you get through that? I mean, like you said, losing a child at such a young age is the most horrible experience any parent can go through. But some parents end up being stuck and unable to move forward. How have you, having gone through everything else along with the loss of your son, how have you managed to move forward and actually thrive as an individual as opposed to being stuck in that grief?
Yes. So in my book, I actually talk about this, and I call it the reservoir of resilience. Is that when I actually experienced the loss of Jacob, I was able to go into my toolbox, right, to this reservoir of resilience, of remembering the things that I have survived in my life. And so no matter how big or small, when you remember and when you stack those experiences, you're able to really see just how strong you are. And you don't know how strong you are until you're faced with the experience, right? A lot of people can imagine like, oh, I know we have talked about this before, and I don't know if we're going to talk about it here, but I've actually escaped from 2 serial killers in my lifetime. And one when I was 15, one when I was 24. And I remember the first one just fighting him off and just being so like resilient to survive, and fought and kicked and scratched my way out of that, of being abducted. And then the other experience at 24, I completely froze and was paralyzed in fear. And, I was not able to come out of that and escape that one until the police came to rescue us. So I say that to say you never know how you're going to respond. So a lot of people have this idea, oh, if I get, held hostage or get abducted, I'm going to fight, or nothing's going to happen to me because I'm going to, be really strong. And to be honest, you have no idea what's going to happen when you're faced with that situation. And so for me, the question is, how did I go forward? Is I remembered all the things that I've survived. And I remember that whatever you survived in the past, you can survive this too. So whatever, for all your listeners out there, anyone watching this video, just a reminder that wherever you are right now, that you can survive this because you're still here, and all that matters is right now. A lot of us, we struggle because we're living in the past of the should have, would have, could have, and we want to rewrite the story. We want to get in the why spiral. Why is this happening to me? What did I deserve to have this happen to me? Right. And those things will not produce anything. Or we're living in the future of, oh my gosh, what if, right? And then we create the story in the future that hasn't happened yet, but yet it's creating all this anxiety in us, all these stories of things in the future that haven't happened. And so for me, what really helped me, even in the hospital with my son, Jacob, he was in the ICU for 2 weeks in a coma. I practiced with the present moment awareness. The practice of present moment awareness is so powerful because in the present moment, there is no suffering. In the now, there is no suffering. So when you can just minute by minute, second by second, live in the now, that is really where what I say, that's where the magic happens. That's where you see what you're made of. That's where your resilience comes out. That's where, your heart can really expand. So those are some of the things that I've learned and I've experienced through tragedy and trauma.
Wow. 2 serial killers, a loss of a child. That's a lot that you've gone through. And yet I see you as this vivacious, energetic, optimistic, amazing person. And your story is so inspirational to me, and that it gives people hope that they can survive anything. And one thing I heard, I think I was Brendan Bouchard who mentioned this, or somebody mentioned it, that what most of us go through is very common. We're not the only one that have ever survived a rape or a serial killer or a loss of a child. There are a lot of other people that have gone through that. Knowing that, does that give you peace, or does that take away from your experience?
That's such a great question. For me, it actually does give me peace because it gives purpose to the pain. It gives purpose to the tragedy. And I'm the type of person, I waste nothing. So whatever it is that I've been through, I'm going to use that to help others with it. Right. And there's a thing that's been studied since 9/11 called post-traumatic growth. I don't know if you're familiar with that.
Mm-hmm.
And at first I thought, oh my gosh, I just have like superpowers. Like, how am I growing through these really, it is almost like the more intense the trauma, the stronger I got. And that's not a challenge universe. I'm okay. Like, I don't need any more challenges. But there was this phenomenon that I would start to really just get so strong after challenge, almost like a defiance, like a rebellion that this is not going to, knock me out kind of a thing. And so as I'm studying post-traumatic growth, it's not something you're born with. It is a learned experience. It's a modeled experience, and it's a practice. So some of the practices of post-traumatic growth are self-awareness, right? Just being fully aware, not blaming, not being a victim, not wondering and spiraling all the questions why, but just having that self-awareness. Number 2 is being in like-minded communities where there are safe people that can relate to you, right? And so I've created many communities where I've created a very safe space for women to be able to share about their trauma. And healing happens in community of shared spaces, right? You as a doctor, you know that when you have a patient in front of you, right, that's when the healing happens, when they're able to articulate and share in a very safe way, authentically and vulnerably. And so I already forgot the question. What was the question again?
You answered it, and that it gives you a sense of purpose, that everybody has gone through that. Now, nowadays, we're coddling our children a little too much because we don't want them to experience any trauma. And that's creating kids that don't have any resilience. They don't have a sense of that they can be okay. And a lot of people are so worried and so afraid of this word trauma because it's thrown around so much with social media, with everything. I mean, I've gone through many traumatic experiences in my life that, just like you, I don't waste. Every single experience I've gone through, I'm very grateful for it now because I am able to channel that and use it to help my patients and be able to relate to other people. But people are too afraid to have their kids have any experiences, any negative experience. Now, do you see a lot of that in the work that you do with the people that you help?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And if I'm going to be completely honest and transparent, I think part of the reasons where Jacob really struggled, my son, is that I tried to keep him in a bubble because, of course, my experience, I was, neglected. I was ran away from home at 15. I saw way too many things at such a young age that I wouldn't wish on anyone. So in return, when I had children, I homeschooled my kids. We went to church 3 times a week. Like, I did all the things to try to protect them, right? And so when you think about that, you're absolutely right. It did not build the resilience in him. And so Jacob was a music artist. He was a hip hop artist. He got signed to a major record label, was living in Hollywood. And in hindsight, now I see, like, I didn't really prepare him for the real world. He looked at life like with Pollyanna eyes, like, oh, everyone's just, loves one another. Everyone forgives each other. Everyone is, and of course, I wish the world was really like that, right? Mm-hmm. And I feel a lot of regret that I didn't really prepare him that, look, the real world is not going to be friendly to you. People will abuse you. People will use you, right? So of course, in hindsight, now I see that really did not help him going into being on his own. And on the flip side, I had a lot of mother wounds and a lot of issues that I had with my mom growing up. And part of it was feeling neglected and feeling like she wasn't there for me. Well, now as an adult, I look at the way that she brought me up with so much gratitude, because her allowing me to really just let me go, that's what helped me to build that resilience, that grit, that tenacity. That's why I can escape from 2 serial killers and live to tell about it, right? Like, I don't know. I couldn't imagine how I would have responded to that if I was coddled, if I was enabled, if I was just this spoiled, child where my parents never let anything happen to me. By the time those experiences happened, I had already been on my own. I ran away from home. I ended up even hanging out in Skid Row in LA. If you know where that is, it's like where the worst of the worst people, are. Homelessness, drugs, violence. For a 15-year-old to be in a situation like that will make you grow up real quick. Right?
Yeah. And I remember listening to when Oprah's mom was dying, she was talking about the same thing, because her mom was never there for her. Her mom was not very nice to her. There's a lot of abuse that she endured, where she one night had to spend the night outside on a porch because she was too dark to be inside the house where her mom worked. And so she had such a hard time saying goodbye to her mom on her deathbed. And then finally she became at peace, because she said, if my mom didn't do all of that, I wouldn't be who I am. Mm. She grew up because of all of that stuff that she had to go through. Obviously, there's wounds, there's trauma, but you can transform that trauma. It's not an end-all, be-all that people are so afraid of, that, oh my God. And then everything is traumatic nowadays. Everything is a trigger nowadays. And I like the idea of a post-traumatic growth where, yes, I've went through this horrible experience, but I've survived and I've thrived and I've grown past it. Then now I can either help other people or even be okay with talking about it.
Yeah. And that is the most important thing. And I appreciate you even having a platform like this, because vulnerability and authenticity, it's not like you can just read it in a Brene Brown book and you got it, right? It's modeled behavior. So the more that you can create a platform for people to share their stories vulnerably, and you get to see a model of, wow, that person went through that, then I can make it through what I'm going through, right? And so I think that's so important. We don't see that enough, because if you look at social media, what do we see? We see all the highlight reels. Ooh, look at me. Look at how successful I am. Look at all the cool things happening in my life. Yeah. Right. And so now, of course, these kids, they have this belief that, oh, that's success. And if I'm not experiencing those successes, then something's wrong with me.
Right. Or if I feel sad, or or a lot of people use their sadness and depression to get the likes and get the attention without really understanding how they can channel that and help them learn from it and grow. One thing that came to mind when you were talking was Glennon Doyle's comment about, she's an author. She talks about, we shouldn't be preventing our kids from walking through fire, but we should teach them how to be fireproof. Mm. And that spoke to me so much, in that as helicopter moms, we're totally trying to overdo it. Like, the way we've been raising our kids for these past 2 generations is unlike anything parents have done in the past. The overly, like, literally now I'm hearing about parents going to college interviews and job interviews with their kids. We're stunting their growth. We're not allowing them to be resilient and to deal with the hardships and to actually experience any negative experiences, because we're trying so hard to protect them. And it's through teaching them that, okay, that happened. Let's work on helping you get better and move past this.
Right. And imagine allowing your 9 or 10-year-old to just go hang out at the mall by themselves, go to, whatever, some big city, some foreign country by themselves. You would never think to do that, right? But yet that's what we do when we have them on their phones. And when we were growing up, maybe we had influence of our neighborhood kids, some high school, friends or middle school friends. But now our kids are influenced by millions of people every day. And so the parent who should be the main influence in the children's lives, we're just one of a million now, right? And so that's a whole other subject of how do we help our kids navigate social media and technology and all the things. And, when you look at the statistics today of especially the young men, the suicide rate is unprecedented. It's the highest it's ever been. I know the numbers in the UK is 1 out of 4 men will commit suicide. From ages 18 to like 40, something like that. It's the number one cause of death. Now, I don't know what the stats here in the US, but I would imagine it's probably close to the same, right?
Yeah.
And when you think about those ages in the, early 20s, when did this come out? When did social media come out? Yeah. It aligns, the timing aligns, and it just is, it's a scary time, but it's also an encouraging time because we have people like you, people like me who are trying to really wake up the masses and have the conversation unapologetically. And really, just bring awareness to it.
It's such a scary time because we're also growing up in this generation. We still don't know. I mean, we're probably just as addicted as our kids are to 100%. Our phones, to our social media. And if we're not aware of how to limit our time with it and how to manage it, how are we doing that with our kids? And I know it's a great babysitter, and we start giving them their phones and their tablets as babies, and so they grow up with that, and they don't, and then it becomes as much of an addiction as cocaine and opioids and whatever else, because your brain is used to that level of dopamine high, and then when you take that away from them, it's as if going through withdrawal from drugs. Absolutely. And we haven't really learned how to effectively do that with our kids in a healthy way, at least as a real consistent thing that people can actually do.
Right. We talked about neglect earlier, right? And so before social media, we had the latchkey kids. I don't know if you remember that, but, 2 parents working, kids are by themselves to raise themselves, and the effects of that had on that generation. And the interesting thing I read recently is that the kids these days are in essence being neglected, even though both parents are home, because both parents are stuck to this. And, really the whole family is. Right. And so they're feeling that same effect of neglect, even though they're physically present.
Right.
And so what is that doing to the psyche, right?
So do you feel comfortable talking about your experience as a child? And I mean, the fact that you somehow thought it was okay to run away at 15 or something pushed you to do that. Can you talk about what led to that, and what was the level of neglect that you felt when you were younger?
Sadly, I experienced abuse, very early on. So starting around 5 years old, I can remember experiencing sexual abuse. And so at 5, you don't know anything. And all I know is that I was told not to say anything. And so for many, many years, there was this deep secret that I held in, again, not knowing what was right or wrong, but innately, I think as a human being, you just know that there's something that's not right about this. And even as I got older, I didn't really have the courage to speak up and to share what was happening. It wasn't until I was in my 20s that for the very first time, I got to share about what was happening to me. And so that sexual abuse starting at age 5 continued on up until my teenage years. I think when I was 15, that's when I left the house because I couldn't speak up. I couldn't fight for myself. The abuse was still happening. And at that time, I was just so paralyzed with fear that I was shaming myself, because at this point I'm like, okay, you're old enough, you can fight it off, you know what's right or wrong, but yet like in my mind, it was still as if I was 5 years old.
Mm.
And so it's interesting because now, we're seeing so many things in the media that's happening, where a lot of these victims are coming out being abused by, really powerful men, either in the media or, all this crazy stuff happening in the world. And I can just really relate to these women because the question for them is, why did you wait so long to say anything? Why did you wait 20 years? Why did you wait? And as a survivor myself, I can tell you why. Because when you get abused, it's almost like you get stunted. Your growth gets stunted and you're still reverting to, when it first happened. And so by 15, I had it and I left the house. And when you experience sexual abuse, some people either revert to being totally promiscuous, just, self-destructive way of living, or other people will isolate, become a recluse. You'll see people maybe gain a lot of weight to try to hide, right? And so I did the opposite, where I was just a party girl. I was out, doing all kinds of things to try to just mask what was really going on inside and try to cover it up. And so that went on all the way up into my 20s until, again, I found that safe place of a circle of women who, were sharing their stories with me. And it made me feel safe enough to share mine. And that's really when the healing started, is when I was able to bring it out. And I remember it was just stuck, that throat chakra. If you're familiar with that, it's like it would not come out for the longest time. There was so much fear there, even as an adult. And so I have so much compassion for a lot of these victims that I've been seeing, in the media. It takes so much courage to really finally let it out and be open. And so that's just a little bit of that part of my journey.
Thank you so much for your vulnerability and sharing that experience. And it is a hard thing. And the sad thing is, as a 5-year-old, what did you know? What you couldn't have done anything about that. But sadly, the victims carry the shame, and we end up protecting the perpetrator instead of saying anything. And that throat chakra is an important one, because for me growing up, when I didn't feel like I had a voice, I would often get sore throats a lot. And I never made that connection that I would always get sore throats, and it actually stunts your voice because you're not really expressing yourself. The more comfortable I became about talking about past wounds, past experiences, the less occurrences of these sore throats happen. So that's definitely a thing. And then finding a group of women that made you feel safe, almost like mother figures.
Absolutely.
That helped you.
Yes, absolutely. And then back to the throat chakra. In my experience, a lot of the clients that I work with who have past especially sexual trauma that they've never shared about, have developed a lot of thyroid issues. And so I'd be interested to know, like, what the statistics of the correlation between thyroid issues and sexual trauma, right? Because there's something about when we don't just let it out, it just gets stuck right here. Like, what is that doing physically to our bodies? So that's an interesting point.
It's also interesting that at 15, when you had that serial killer, you were able to fight because you didn't fight your perpetrator, but you had so much rage that you just had the ability to fight him off. But then
I just got the chills. I never connected that, but you're absolutely right. And I mean, I was fighting for my life and I didn't know I had that in me, So yeah, you're absolutely right that it was probably all that pent up anger and rage. Absolutely.
So what do you think happened between 15 and 24 where you ended up freezing? Did something happen in between that kind of made you lose confidence, that made you lose touch with that rage that you had that need to protect yourself?
I think it's very different when you have a gun to your face. It's very different. You think or I thought I was tough because I've already experienced something like that. And, I grew up again around gang members and, really like I thought I was this tough girl.
Mhm.
And so, you're not very tough when you have a gun to your face,
Mhm.
I have to say. And again, you don't know how you're going to respond. But when I had that to my face, the response was complete, just freeze. And I think part of that is you really just get to see your life flash before your eyes. You've heard that before, you've seen in movies, and people are in that near death, they see their life flash before their eyes. And I had that experience, like that's how certain I was that if I didn't do what this man said, that he would kill me. Like there was just no doubt that he was serious about, you know, uh, killing us. So, it was me and a girlfriend that he abducted. And so, when you have that much certainty and belief that this is not going to end well if you don't do what this person says, for me, I froze. I didn't fight.
Feel free to talk about this or don't talk about this, but you mentioned something in our conversation previously about just being at peace and letting go. You want to talk about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So, at 24, I'd become a Christian. I was, very involved in my church. I had this beautiful relationship with God, and I really felt like I was special and protected, and nothing bad was going to happen to me because I had developed this new found religion, this new relationship with God. And so when my girlfriend and we went out to dinner, and when we were getting in our car, this guy comes out of the back alley with a gun, and he had a hoodie on, had the mask on, and he, points the gun at us and tells us to get in, or tells me to get in the back of the back seat, and tells my girlfriend to drive the car. And he has the gun to her side, and he says to me, if you try anything back there, I'm gonna shoot her. And so again, the certainty in his voice, there was no doubt that he was serious about what he was saying. But there was still this part of me like, oh, I'm protected. I've got my angels around me. Nothing bad's going to happen to me. And then he drove us to South Central LA to a dingy, dark motel. And he had made us walk to the teller to get a room. And he had the gun to the back of us, and he was standing behind us, and he made us, get this room. And even up until then, I thought, oh, nothing bad. He just wants to make sure we don't get away. He's going to rob us, take the car, take our money, but, we're going to be fine. We go into the motel room. He makes us strip our clothes off. And even then, I'm like, oh, he just really wants to make sure we don't get away. Like, this is how naive my mind was. I just was still thinking best case scenario, he's going to make sure, or, we take our clothes off so we don't run and try to tell anyone what happened. And then he threw my girlfriend into the bathroom, and then he proceeded to, rape me, put pillow over my head and raped me. And that's when I just was super just devastated, obviously. And I had this out of body experience where I was up into the ceiling, and actually I was being held by Jesus, and Jesus was saying to me, he can touch your body, but he can't touch your soul, and you're going to be just fine. And so even though this traumatic thing was happening, I actually was there, but I wasn't there, right? And I didn't know what this phenomenon was. And the more that I studied about it later on, I saw that it is a real thing that happens when people are experiencing trauma, where they completely disassociate from their bodies as a defense mechanism, as a protection. And so after he was done, I was convinced he was going to kill me, chop me up into little pieces. Nobody will ever find me again, right? Because all the movies that I watched, I was convinced that's what was going to happen. But then he threw me into the bathroom, and then ended up raping my girlfriend, who was there. So when I was in the bathroom, I remember just laying on the cold tile floor, curled up in a fetal position, and just devastated. Like, how can this happen? What am I going to do now? And just feeling so helpless. And at that moment is when my life flashed before me, and I was able to see, everything that I've ever done, all the people that I've ever wronged. And I started making amends right then and there. And I said, God, if today's my day, if I'm ready to meet you, then I want to die faithful. I want to die, completely resolved and pure and ready to go and meet my maker. And as soon as I said that, I was standing straight up in the shower, and I was resolute, and I was literally ready to die. Like, I had so much peace. I was like, okay, if this is my last day, I'm going to die faithful. I'm going to die fighting, and it's going to be just fine. And as soon as I said that, there was a knock on the door, and it was the police. And it felt like an eternity, but they were probably out there for 60 seconds, enough time for me to put my clothes on, run out there. And this is the first time that I saw the perpetrator's face without the mask. And he's crying, and he's saying, I don't know what came over me. Please forgive me. And he gives the gun to my girlfriend. And I actually was carrying a Bible in my jacket, and I take the Bible out, and I go to him, and I give him the Bible, and I say, I forgive you, and God forgives you. And that then the police come, they handcuff everybody because they don't know who's in there. And they put us all in separate patrol cars. As soon as I got in the back of the patrol car, that's when I just broke down, because I realized, oh, wow, we're safe. We're going to be okay. And ended up being in 2 years of trials, to put this perpetrator away. And what we found out is that there were 33 other victims that came forward to testify against him. So he was a serial rapist. And they say for every one person that comes forward, there may be 3 that don't. So who knows really how many people this man did this to. But I can tell you that out of everything that I've been through, because there was that instant forgiveness and peace and letting go, I've never had to deal with that situation, going forward. Like, I just felt so much peace that it was over, and we were rescued. And honestly, I've been able to help so many women who have experienced rape and sexual abuse, and they trust me. I get emotional. They know that I've lived it, so they can hear it from me, and they see what life could be like and what is possible for them. So as horrible and as traumatic as this experience was, also I know that the level that I can help people is there's so much depth there because of what I've experienced. And so in a weird, crazy way, I am grateful for it, because I know that experience is what has allowed me to really serve and give and help so many women heal. So yeah, just a little snippet of that experience, but that was definitely a very challenging one.
Wow. I just admire your bravery, your courage for sharing that story, and your ability to forgive. That's a hard thing to forgive, but you were able to leave it. And I'm glad that you had your faith to help you get through that. Has your faith been the thing to help you get through Jacob's death as well?
100%. 100%. I mean, I think for me, my faith has evolved. When I first became a Christian, there was a lot of dogma. There was a lot of, this belief of, oh, nothing bad's going to happen to me because I'm a Christian now. And it's like, oh, good things don't happen or bad things don't happen to good people kind of attitude. And then you realize, no, life happens to all of us. How are you going to navigate it when it happens to you? Right. And so as I've evolved in my beliefs and my faith, I'm really realizing that we don't know what's happening on the other side, and what purpose, what reasons, even what gifts come from tragedy, and really being able to create meaning from it, right? Because we're meaning making machines, and in my opinion, every situation that we go through, it's neutral. it's just what it is. It's a situation, right? The rape was a situation. What meaning did I give it? Here's the interesting thing. Me and this other person, right? Both of us experienced the same thing at the exact same time. I created a meaning for this as, wow, I'm going to make purpose out of this pain. And I'm going to use this to help people. And I'm going to use this to propel me to make an impact in this world. Where this other person, and no judgment, I'm just saying that the duality of how both of us experienced this, right? She ended up hating God. She ended up feeling like, why did this happen to me? This is not fair. She ended up, getting divorced. She ended up really not being able to overcome, not that there's a right way to overcome, but I'm just saying that there's two different stories that were created.
Right.
And so think about that, whatever's happening in your life right now, you get to narrate the story to it. You don't have to allow the world or the circumstance to narrate the story for you. You get to create the story. Even Jacob's passing, right? He passed from a drug overdose. I could have created a story of like, oh my gosh, I'm a horrible mom. My kid was, a drug addict, like whatever, right? I could have created all kinds of stories of shame, stigma, woe is me.
And kept you stuck. Yeah.
It kept me stuck. But I've created the story of, you know what? We're going to use this to, again, bring awareness, bring education, help other parents navigate this so that they don't have to be alone. It's so isolating already as it is because of all the shame and stigma. My husband and I, we put ourselves out there. He's creating a documentary right now. I've written a book, right? We host events and workshops and retreats to help people bring that safe space to them so that they know they're not alone and that you can survive and thrive from any of these experiences that we're talking about. So it's really all about what story you create.
And I love the saying about God doesn't call the prepared, he prepares the called. And if you think about the religious figures in we're different religions, but we have common prophets and historical figures in common, and that all of them went through so much hardship.
Yeah.
These are God's beloved. These are God's messengers, God's prophets, and yet they're going through such hardship. So it's not just I'm religious, therefore nothing bad's ever going to happen to me. Sometimes the bad things that happen to us, we don't know what the purpose of that is, or what direction that's supposed to take us, and what opportunities are meant to come our way as a result of it.
Yeah, absolutely. That's such a great point because it kind of goes back to what we were talking about earlier, right? Like all of us as parents, we want to be proud of our kids. We want them to grow up to be successful adults. We want them to thrive. We want them to, we want the best for them. And in the scriptures, talks about that suffering is what produces perseverance, and perseverance is what produces hope. And a lot of times, when we keep our children from suffering, and not even our children, ourselves, when we keep ourselves from suffering, right, we keep ourselves from that growth. We keep ourselves from growing, from really getting to the other side, right? When I talked about the work that I do with people, helping them overcome those limiting beliefs, part of that is helping walk people through their suffering, not prevent them from suffering.
No, the only way for us to heal any of this is not to avoid the suffering or to avoid the feelings. We have to feel it to heal it. It really, it sounds cliche, but we really have to allow these dark emotions, these negative emotions to come through us and out of us in order for there to be healing that happens in its place. But people, and my work anyway, that I've realized is what they don't realize is that these unspoken emotions, they stay alive inside of us. They don't go away just because we ignore them. If you chose to ignore, like maybe that your friend chooses not to look at what happened and would rather avoid it, and maybe she's getting into one bad relationship after another as a result of that, or her marriage is suffering, or her other relationships in her life I literally had a patient who went through severe sexual abuse at the hands of her father. And at 19, she left and moved away. But then at 80, she started having nightmares as if he was still alive and he was about to harm her.
Wow.
So and then going back through, as we walk back through her choices, every choice she made from 19 until 80 was just chaos after chaos because she never healed from what happened. And she was just trying to cover up, like trying to avoid, trying to ignore. And it never went away. It doesn't go away at 80. It doesn't go away at 90. So the best thing to do is to just brace yourself, find somebody like you to help them walk through the pain, walk through the struggle, and know the promise of it gets so much better on the other side once the wound is healed.
Wow. Yeah.
Go ahead.
80 and 90, that's intense. That's intense. And I always say, grief is energy. And energy has to have a place to go. So when we stuff it, that's what causes physical ailments. That's what causes mental health. That's what underlying a lot of, addictions, different things, because we're trying to shove it down with things to give us that temporary relief. When really, like you said earlier, you do have to feel it. And a lot of people don't want to, because again, we're not taught how to, we're not modeled how to. And so there's so much fear of the unknown of like, oh, if I do that, like, I know I talk to a lot of people who are grieving and they don't want to cry because they say, if I let one tear down, it's never going to stop.
That's not even true. Eventually it will stop, but the tears are so healing. Did you know that under the microscope, your tears have a different chemical makeup than your sad tears are different than your happy tears, than your fear tears? They're all different.
Yes. Yes.
That is such a miracle to me that and then when we're releasing those tears, it is so healthy for us.
Yes.
There was a point in my life in my early 20s when I just became like, I did stuff. I didn't know how to deal with anything. I didn't know anything about mental health. I didn't know anything about psychology or, like I was studying psychology as a student, but I didn't really know anything about therapy or any like processing the stuff in a healthy way. So I just stuffed a lot of my feelings and I became so numb. And I was like, God, I'm so numb that you could literally kill somebody in front of me. And I'd be like, eh. And that scared me. And so I started renting really sad movies to force myself to cry.
Yeah.
And that crying helped me get back in touch with my that soft, sensitive side of myself. And then it removed the wall that I built up. Like we talked about how you could be resilient and you can be tough and strong, which is great. But the extreme end of that is somebody can build a bunch of walls around themselves and just not want to feel anything. They're like, I'm just strong. But really, it's out of fear that they're building this huge wall around them because it's easier to hide behind that. And I wouldn't consider that resilience or strong. And it's important for that individual to make that distinction that if I'm not thriving, if I'm constantly in fear, if I'm constantly triggered by every little thing, and everything is affecting me and I'm still reacting emotionally to it, you're not healed at that point. You still need to go get that work done. And I liken this to, do you remember being a kid and seeing a shadow on the wall in your bedroom and it's like a scary shadow that you're thinking, what is that? Mm-hmm. And then all night you could be hiding under your covers and wondering, okay, how am I going to fall asleep with the scary thing in my room? Or you could just turn the light on and realize that's just a coat that I put over it.
Yeah, that's great. That's great.
And that's like seconds. That's like, it takes literally seconds for you to be like, oh, it's just a coat. And then you just go to sleep. Or you could suffer the entire night and wonder how you're going to fall asleep with a scary image or shadow in your room.
I love that. That's so good. That's so good. Yeah. And I think, so many people, I always say we're grief illiterate, especially in the Western world, and we're death phobic.
Yes.
So you add those two things together, you wonder why people aren't willing to do the work because there's so much fear there. And it's really not fear. I think it's just the lack of education, the lack of information.
Fear of the unknown, fear of uncertainty, like you said, fear of not knowing what one tear might mean. I mean, when I used to have a lot of anger, I was afraid to express anger because I thought it would be such huge rage that I'd be afraid of myself. And then the more I started journaling and writing, and I was like, okay, I'm not a threat at all. I'm not that scary. But in my mind, I made that to be so much bigger than it was. And we do the same thing with our traumas, with our depression, with our anxiety. We make it so much bigger than it actually is. But when we actually confront it and talk about it and write about it, it's like, okay, it's not as big as I thought. I'm
Right.
way bigger than it. Yeah.
So good. Wow.
Well, this is a really great conversation. I mean, I admire you so much for having the courage to share so much and be so vulnerable and talk about your experiences. I hope that it helps people that are going through this, that there's definitely hope, regardless of what you've gone through. There are people that have survived horrific experiences. And again, like you said, they either remain stuck and just completely like allow life to just fall apart around them, or they can actually move through it and thrive and still be successful and still have a connection to God and to faith, because you don't know what plans God has for you.
Right. And sometimes it doesn't look like the way that we think it's going to look, right? I mean, I remember being a young adult and just knowing I was made for more and I was meant for more. And I had this desire to impact, a lot of people, not for my own ego, but just to share and let, like, there's no way that all these things happen in my life just for me to be selfish with it.
Yeah.
There's a purpose for it. And so now that, I'm able to share it with as many people as possible, I don't take it lightly. It's a gift, and I'm very grateful to be able to share it in platforms like this. And, I host conferences and workshops and retreats and different things that just help people not feel alone. I think that's my main purpose, is like, I want to help people to see that they don't have to do this alone, and that I can be an example of what's possible for them.
And you're removing the shame and the stigma around it by talking about it. You talking about it and you being vulnerable gives other people permission to be vulnerable. Me even sharing my history of anxiety and everything I went through in my 20s and 30s. At first I was like, oh my God, I shouldn't talk about any of this. I shouldn't tell anybody. But I don't want that stigma to hold anybody back. There's no need to suffer. We suffer by not talking. We suffer by hiding. We suffer by just not wanting to say anything and protecting our perpetrators. Share, talk, write about it. Start with journaling. Just write about it first if you don't feel comfortable talking to anybody about it.
Right. And to be honest, I would trust a doctor that's actually had the experience more than someone who's just there teaching me from a textbook. You know what I mean? So I appreciate that you show up that way in the world. And, we need more therapists, doctors, psychiatrists, that are really able to share their life as well. Because I think that's the common denominator we all have,
Right.
On a heart level, is our experiences and our stories, not our degrees or our money or successes. It's about the connection of what we've been through. So
yeah, that common connection, that bond is very strong. And it really, you end up finding people. And they say some of the most beautiful, the strongest, most wonderful people are people that have gone through so much and they've come out the other way stronger and better and happier. And so that is what's possible. And you demonstrate that. And I admire you so much for that.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Well, such an honor to be here. And, I love that we get to have this connection and we get to be local and be in each other's lives. So thank you for having me.
I appreciate that so much. Can you tell everybody how people can find you and work with you, especially if they have like the experiences that they want to work with you and help overcome it? How can they find you? How can they reach you?
Probably the easiest is just going onto my website, judythureson.com. That's JudyThureson.com. And there you'll find ways to work with me, whether it's grief recovery. I host an online group called From Grief to Growth. And how can we transform your grief into growth? That one's a really powerful 7-week course. And then I also have small group coaching containers. I host retreats. The next one will be in the UK in March and in Bali in August of next year. So you have a lot of time to prepare. So come join me. And I partner with a lot of amazing coaches from all over the world. One in particular, he's one of the greatest trauma coaches. And so we do a 6-day retreat called Elevate Retreat. And we help really just help women transform their lives in 6 days. And it's such a powerful experience. So we invite you to that as well. And social media, I'm a resource. If you have anyone, you or anyone you know that's struggling, just reach out to me on social media or email my website, and I'm very available to just connect with you.
I'll make sure to share all of that in your show notes so people can find you and work with you. And your retreats sound amazing. Bali,
come on. Oh, and I forgot, get my book, Beautiful Tragedy. There's a lot of amazing tools, really practical tools. I wrote it for grieving parents, and it's easy read that they can turn around and give it to their 15-year-old kid, and that they can also read it and glean from it with really practical tools for the family. Grief, especially when you have someone struggling with addiction, it's almost harder to grieve someone while they're still alive. Right? Because the person that you thought they were, they're no longer. And so you have to learn how to navigate that. And so I talk a lot about that in my book as well. So that's
which
another
I'm
way.
assuming is available on Amazon.
It is, yes. Yeah. Beautiful Tragedy.
I will definitely link that as well. Okay. Well, Judy, thank you so much for having this conversation with me. It was such a joy to talk to you.
So good. Thank you so much for having me.
That was such a powerful discussion and conversation with Judy. She talked about so many different things about being vulnerable, but the most important thing that the message that I want us to walk away from this conversation is to not suffer needlessly by stuffing your emotions and avoiding the tough feelings that are coming up for you, or avoiding the past experiences that were not necessarily pleasant. Face it. Talk about it, write about it. Just don't stuff it. Whenever we stuff our emotions deep inside of us, it actually stays alive and is energetically alive. And when I say alive, I mean it still has a charge to it. It still has an energy to it, where we're getting weepy and uncontrollable times. We're feeling angry and reactive to things because we're sitting on all of this energy inside of us that's not processed. So the more you can start thinking about some of these difficult experiences or difficult traumatic experiences or thoughts or emotions that you're dealing with, talk about it, journal about it, get it out of you so that it no longer has control over you. And the more you do that, the freer you're going to feel, the stronger you're going to feel, the more resilient you're going to feel. And you're not going to be held back by these unprocessed emotions. If they're too strong and too overwhelming for you, please seek the help of a trained mental health professional to help you and guide you through this so that it's no longer being a burden in your life, so that it can give you the freedom to move forward and not be held back by these negative memories and negative thoughts. It's definitely possible to move beyond trauma and move beyond grief and actually thrive beyond these negative experiences like Judy has. So if you want to learn more about Judy, you can go to drsicandri.com/podcast, and that will link you to her show notes page. And then if you haven't subscribed to our podcast or to our channel, please do so that you can know when new episodes drop. And stay in touch with us. And please share your comments with us about what you gained from this interview, from this presentation, and reach out to Judy if you need help. Okay, until next time, take care.